The firestorms above the capital rained sparks over the crystal domes of the royal city. Warships hung in the air like silent vultures, and the once peaceful streets were littered with debris and broken banners. The humans had landed only 3 weeks ago, but everything changed in those 21 days. Alliances shattered, treaties burned, and in the heart of the chaos stood a single human, technician surrounded by alien royalty. His name was Elias. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't even part of the diplomatic corps. He was a backup systems engineer brought to the Empress's ship to patch damaged AI code. But now he stood inside the most sacred room in the Empire, holding a golden circlet in one trembling hand. The princess lay unconscious after the assassination attempt. Her people blamed his species for the attack. The guards wanted him thrown into the void. But the Empress, mysterious and unreadable, had ordered otherwise. She gave him one impossible command: fix the crown and restore the throne's interface. Before sundown, he didn't understand why the crown mattered so much. But when he placed it on the marble bench, dozens of glowing neural threads rose like living vines. It was more than metal and gems. It was a living database, a weapon and a legacy fused into one. If the crown stayed broken, the empire would collapse overnight. Elias worked with trembling hands. Every movement echoed in the high dome chamber. Alien officials watched him from the shadows. They whispered in languages he couldn't follow. Yet one pair of eyes never left him: the Empress's youngest daughter, Princess Virela, who had awakened moments earlier and said nothing at all. She was unlike the others. Her skin shimmered with pale silver hues, and her eyes, twin galaxies of violet and blue, studied him with cold curiosity. She didn't ask who he was or why a human was fixing the symbol of her people's power. She simply sat on the edge of the dais watching. He risked a glance at her. "Almost done," he muttered without thinking. She tilted her head slightly but didn't reply. He turned his focus back to the crown. The neural lines pulsed erratically. He had to adjust their alignment manually, or the artifact could discharge. In a violent burst, every movement mattered. A wrong signal would not only fry the crown, it could kill him instantly. Sweat ran down his neck. One final thread refused to connect. He reached forward, adjusted a node, and the entire crown pulsed with light. A soft hum filled the room like a heartbeat returning. He turned and offered it with both hands. The princess stepped down silently. The room seemed to grow stiller with each of her steps. She reached for the crown, but paused. Her eyes searched his, and for the first time, she spoke, her voice like cool wind across burning stone. "Do you love me, human?" Elias froze. His mouth opened, but no words came out. He glanced around, expecting laughter or mockery. None came. No one moved. Not even the guards. Her eyes held him still, not threatening, not pleading. Just waiting. For something real. He slowly placed the crown into her hands. Her fingers brushed his. He didn't speak, but something passed between them. Something unspoken. Something not in any treaty or data stream. She stepped back and raised the crown over her head, pausing again as if to hear an answer from him. He wasn't sure if it was the heat of the moment, or the surreal silence in the chamber, but something in him responded without sound. She smiled. Faintly, not with triumph or manipulation, but as if hearing something only she could understand. She placed the crown on her head and the chamber burst into gold light. The AI returned online. Power surged through the floors. The nobles fell to their knees. A new empress had risen. And the first face she looked toward wasn't her mother's or her general's. It was his. Outside, the battle still raged. Ships still fought above. But inside the chamber, something ancient and powerful had shifted. Not because of a weapon, not because of war, but because one human touched something sacred and didn't look away. And in that moment, every rule of the empire began to change. Asterisk. The Ceremony ended in silence, not because the people were unimpressed, but because they were afraid to breathe wrong in the presence of the new empress. Varela stood tall, her crown glowing with soft pulses of blue and gold. Her gaze swept across the noble circle, but her eyes returned to Elias once more before she spoke to anyone else. She raised her hand, and everyone around the hall bowed low, except him. Elias remained standing, uncertain of what to do. He wasn't trained for royal protocol. He wasn't sure if moving would offend or if staying still was another crime. But the Empress gave a small nod, and somehow, that saved his life. The guards stepped forward, not to arrest him, but to escort him gently out of the throne chamber. Elias followed them, glancing over his shoulder just once. She was still watching him. He felt it in his chest. Not just as curiosity, but as if something in her had chosen him already. He was taken to the inner quarters, not a prison, but not freedom either. It was a guest chamber with polished floors, high arched ceilings, and a single guard posted outside. He sat on the edge of the bed, trying to process what had happened. He was still alive. And more confusingly, she had asked him a question no one else heard. "Do you love me, human?" The words echoed in his ears like a haunting song. He had barely met her. They hadn't spoken before. She hadn't even smiled until that moment. But she had asked with a voice that sounded less like flirtation and more like destiny knocking. The door opened again, and an elderly alien entered. She wore robes of deep maroon and held a data slate in her hands. "The Empress has requested you remain within the palace," she said calmly. "You will be granted diplomatic protection, but also placed under formal observation, for your safety and hers." Elias blinked. "Why mine?" he asked, confused. "I'm no threat to her." The old woman looked up from her slate. Her eyes were sharp despite her age. "You don't understand what you've done," she said. "Fixing the crown means you touched the legacy of the first line. You were part of her ascension. That makes you a part of prophecy." He wanted to laugh. Prophecy? He was a technician, a fixer of wires and fuses. He barely knew how to talk to royalty, let alone become part of some ancient tale. But the woman saw the disbelief on his face and smiled without humor. "Don't worry. She'll summon you when ready. She always does." That night, Elias lay awake staring at the ceiling. The light strips above shimmered with alien script, slowly scrolling like a lullaby written by machines. He closed his eyes but couldn't rest. Her face appeared in his mind again and again. Not because she was beautiful, but because she had looked straight into his soul without flinching. The next day came quietly. The guard brought food but said nothing. The halls outside remained calm. No one else came. But just before sunset, the door opened again. Two royal attendants stepped in, both women dressed in translucent silk and armored belts. "The Empress requests your presence in the garden," one said. He followed them past high pillars and glowing statues until the stone paths turned to floating steps that crossed over a shimmering pool. The garden wasn't green like earth. It was full of crystal plants, glowing blue grass, and hovering orbs of pollen that buzzed softly. In the center stood Varela alone. She wore no crown now. Her hair was free, falling over her shoulders in silver waves. She turned at the sound of his steps and gave a faint smile. "Thank you for coming," she said, not as an empress but as someone speaking from her own will. "I wanted to speak without the eyes of others." Elias nodded, not sure what words would be right. She stepped closer and held out a single hand. "Do you think our kind can truly understand each other?" she asked. "Not just tolerate, but really feel?" Her voice trembled slightly, not from fear, but from something deeper. "I don't know," Elias replied honestly. "But I think it starts with listening, and maybe trust." She stared at him, then took his hand. For a moment, nothing mattered, not war, not politics, not species. Just the warmth of fingers meeting in a quiet alien garden. And then, for the second time, she whispered to him, but this time not a question. "Then listen to my heart, human, and tell me if it sounds like yours." Elias didn't move right away after she said those words. The garden was too quiet, too perfect, as if time had stopped just for this moment. Her hand was still in his, soft yet firm, and he could feel a slight tremble that told him this was not rehearsed. She wasn't playing politics. She wasn't playing at all. The warm glow of the floating orbs shimmered across her silver skin, making her look unreal. Elias felt out of place, yet more connected than ever. His voice was quiet. When he finally answered, "It does," he said. "Your heart sounds just like mine." He didn't know what that meant exactly, but it felt true. She smiled, and that changed everything. It wasn't the cold expression of a royal mask. It was human in its vulnerability. She looked down at their hands for a second, then slowly stepped back. "You will cause trouble here," she said gently. "The court already whispers that I let a stranger into my mind." Elias was unsure how to respond. He had no plan, no idea what she expected. "I didn't ask for this," he said truthfully. "But I won't run either. If I'm going to be used in your world, I'd rather stand beside you than behind you." Varela's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but focus. "I don't want you to be used at all," she said. "That's why I'm warning you now. They'll come for you. Maybe not today, but soon. Not with blades, but with lies, with doubt, with small things that eat away at your place here. They will call you a tool, a puppet, a lover too low to matter." He shook his head. "Let them talk," he said. "I've worked in silence all my life. I'm used to being invisible. But I see you, and that's enough." Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. For once, the Empress didn't know what to say. So she turned away and looked out over the glowing garden floor. "You've already changed something," she whispered. "The crown accepted your hands. My heart listened to your truth. That breaks every tradition we've ever held. They'll want to rewrite it all, to erase your part, but I won't let them." She turned back to him with a quiet fire in her eyes. "Then I'll hold the line with you," Elias replied. "Whatever comes, I won't leave you alone." That promise sat between them like a solid wall of light. She didn't thank him. She didn't bow or offer reward. She simply stood in silence for a long moment, before reaching up and removing the crown. She held it toward him. "Take it, just for tonight. Let the stars know you're part of this now." Elias hesitated, then slowly reached out and accepted the golden artifact. It was heavier than he expected. Not just in weight, but in meaning. He held it with both hands and stared into its glow. The crown pulsed with light, as if alive in his. GRASP. Symbols danced across the surface, shifting in rhythm with his heartbeat. The floating orbs dimmed for a moment, as if acknowledging the transfer. Varela stepped back, hands empty, face calm. "Return it to me tomorrow at dawn," she said. "And until then, guard it as if guarding me." Elias nodded, holding it close. For the first time since he arrived, he felt more than just a technician. He felt chosen. Not by fate, but by someone who could have picked anyone and still chose him. The next morning came too fast. The palace stirred with movement before the first sun rose. Courtiers and guards passed in hurried silence. Something felt wrong. When Elias opened his door, 2 guards were already waiting. Their weapons were drawn, but lowered. "You must come at once," one said. He followed quickly, heart pounding. The crown was in his arms, wrapped in cloth, its hum growing louder as if sensing danger. They led him to the high council chamber, where the Empress stood alone at the center, surrounded by angry nobles who pointed and shouted in their alien tongues. When she saw Elias enter, her face did not change. She raised her hand, silencing the room. "The one who restored the crown shall now return it," she said firmly. Not as servant. Not as prisoner. But as proof of unity beyond blood and species. Elias stepped forward, unwrapped the cloth, and lifted the crown above his head. The chamber fell into complete silence. One by one, the nobles dropped to their knees. Some did it out of fear, others out of respect. But all of them did it because they knew something had changed forever. As he placed the crown gently back onto Varela's head, the walls of the chamber glowed with the ancient sigils of the first line. A signal flashed across the empires. Core relays. The line of succession was now shared by one born of Earth, and no one could take that moment away from them. Asterisk after the ceremony. Elias was led back to his chamber under heavier guard than before. The crown had been returned, the nobles silenced for now, but tension hung in the air like a drawn blade. Everyone had witnessed it. A human had placed the crown on their new empress's head, and no one could deny what that meant. Inside his room, Elias sat on the floor instead of the bed. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what he had done. It hadn't been a performance. He hadn't acted like a savior. He had simply responded to her trust, and now, the empire was shifting under their feet. A soft knock broke the silence. It was strange no guards knocked. He stood quickly, expecting another official or perhaps a warning. But when the door opened, it was Varela herself. She stepped in without a word, dressed in plain robes, her crown absent, her face bare of royal paint. He stared at her, confused. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered. "If they see you alone with me, they'll twist it again." She didn't answer at first. She closed the door gently behind her and walked toward him, her hands folded in front of her. "Let them twist," she said quietly. "They've done it all my life." He didn't know what to say. She wasn't here as a ruler. She was here as someone tired of masks. She sat beside him on the floor, her silver hair brushing his shoulder. "I thought when I wore the crown, everything would feel clear," she said. "But instead, I feel like I'm walking across a lake of glass." "You're not alone on it," Elias said. "Even glass can hold if someone walks beside you." She turned her head and looked at him, her expression softened. "That's why I came, not because I'm afraid, but because I need you to understand what's coming. My mother is alive, but she is dying." His chest tightened. He hadn't seen the Empress since the attack. "I thought she recovered," he said. Varela shook her head. "No, she used the last of her strength to transfer authority to me. And now her final command is to hold the empire together." But her eyes no longer see. Her words are confused. "The healers say days." A heavy silence followed. Then Elias asked, "What will happen when she passes?" Varela stared at her hands. "A coronation will follow. A real one. And I'll need to choose my consort. Tradition demands I bond with a noble of equal lineage. They'll expect a match with one of the 12 houses." He understood what she was saying without her saying it directly. "You're trying to tell me you can't pick me," he said. "That we can't be anything real. Not in front of them." She didn't deny it. But she reached out and took his hand again. "I don't care what they see. I care what I feel." The chamber lights dimmed slightly as the sun dipped beneath the horizon. The city outside shimmered in waves of blue and pink light, reflected across the palace walls. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I want something that's not arranged, not decided by bloodlines or council votes. I want to feel like I matter beyond my title." Elias rested his head against hers. "You already matter beyond titles. To me, you're not just Empress. You're the only one here who sees me as more than a tool." Her grip tightened. Neither of them moved. Words became unnecessary. Silence between them, said enough. Suddenly, the door opened and a guard stepped in sharply. His eyes widened when he saw them, and he quickly looked away. "Apologies, Empress. There's movement outside the city. Unidentified ships approaching at high velocity. The council is requesting your presence immediately. Varela stood at once, her expression shifting from soft to sharp. Prepare the war room. I'll be there shortly. The guard nodded and vanished. Elias stood too, uncertain. Should I come with you? He asked. She paused for a breath, then nodded once. They walked together through the halls, past servants and nobles who whispered behind jeweled sleeves. But no one dared stop her. No one dared stop him either. Whatever else the court believed, the new empress had made her decision clear. Inside the war chamber, holograms of enemy ships blinked across a star map. Generals stood in clusters, eyes narrowing as she entered. Who are they? She asked. Calmly, a voice replied. Rogue fleet, possibly mercenaries. Their leader claims to speak for the forgotten bloodline. That name stirred gasps among the officials. Even Elias noticed the sudden unease. Varela's eyes darkened. Then this war isn't over, she said coldly. It's only just begun. Prepare to deploy a response force. And tell them if they want my crown, they can try to take it. And as she stepped forward toward the command table, every noble in the room watched in silence, not because she was powerful, but because standing beside her was a human no one dared to remove. The war room buzzed with sharp voices and flickering lights. Every screen displayed the same image, a fleet of dark ships edging closer to the royal system. Their markings were unfamiliar to most, but the older nobles whispered one name again. And again with fear carved into their faces, the forgotten bloodline. A name buried in history, erased from records, purged from memory, exiled generations ago for treason against the crown. Varela stood without flinching, her gaze locked on the advancing symbols. She had never seen them before, but something in her bones knew their meaning. They waited for this, she said quietly. They didn't attack during my mother's reign because they feared her power. But now they think I'm weak, new, unready. They believe the crown has cracks in it, just because I chose someone different to stand at my side. Elias stood just behind her, silent, observing the tension grow thicker by the second. He wasn't a strategist or a warrior, but even he could feel the dangerous rhythm of the room. Every eye weighed her leadership. Every breath waited for hesitation, but Varela gave them none. We won't fire first, she ordered, but we will be ready. Signal all outer defenses. Activate planetary shields. If they cross the marker without response, I want to speak to their leader directly. The generals exchanged glances. One of them, a tall creature with cobalt skin and sunken eyes, stepped forward. Empress, this may be a ruse to draw you into personal contact. Let us handle this with full military response. A show of force may scatter them. No, she sighed. They came to test me, not our fleet. They want to see if I'm just a child playing ruler. I'll prove otherwise. Open communication lines. I want their commander on screen now. Her voice cut through the room like a command from the stars themselves. Within minutes, a large monitor flickered to life, and a figure appeared. He was armored in black metal that shimmered with blood-red veins. His face was masked, but his voice was deep and sharp. So this is the girl who wears the crown now. And the human at her side. How poetic. A throne lowered to Earth's level. Varela's expression didn't change. State your purpose, she said. You're outnumbered, surrounded, and unwelcome. You knew that before entering this system. So what do you want? The figure laughed, a sound like metal scraping bone. What I want, little empress, is to be remembered. We were cast out, forgotten, but the blood of rulers still runs in our veins. We return not for war, but for what was stolen, the throne, the legacy. And you, Varela, sit on it like a child with no rightful claim. She stepped forward, eyes like sharpened blades. Then come and take it, she said. But know this, I don't rule alone. My people stand behind me. And my choice, my human, stands beside me. If you believe. Strength lies only in bloodlines you've already lost. The signal cut. Silence fell over the chamber like a heavy curtain. Elias looked at her, unsure if he should speak. She turned to him slowly, her shoulders tight. They won't back down. They're not here to negotiate. They came to make a point. He nodded. Then we make ours louder. She gave a faint smile, only for him. Stay close, she said. From here on, they'll target you first. They'll see you as the crack they can break through. But I won't let them. Outside, the capital city began to shift. Defense towers rose from underground bays. Shields shimmered into place across the palace spires. Fighters launched in formations like silver birds ready to strike. The air itself seemed to vibrate with coming war. Varela stood at the balcony as sirens echoed in the distance. Her robe flowed in the wind. Elias joined her, standing without armor, without weapons, but not without resolve. She looked at him and asked, "If this is the last quiet moment we get, what would you say to me?" He didn't hesitate. "I'd say I was never supposed to be part of this world. But now that I am, I'd rather die beside you than live wondering what we could have been." She stepped closer, her eyes full of stormlight and sorrow. "Then stay with me, not as protector, not as tool, but as the one person who dared to love me, not for my crown, but in spite of it." And as the sky above darkened with enemy ships, the Empress and the human stood together beneath the rising storm. The first wave came at dawn, when the twin suns had barely risen over the horizon. Enemy ships broke through the outer defense wall using cloaked missiles that tore through the quiet with a sharp streak of fire. The shields held for a moment, then flickered under the pressure as alarms rang through the capital. Varela was already in the war chamber before the alert sounded. Her armor was silver with accents of royal violet, sleek but unburdened by decoration. She moved between command tables with calm precision, issuing orders to every sector while holograms displayed the enemy's every advance. Elias stood beside her, not as a soldier, but as a reminder. He had no rank, no training, but no one dared move him. His presence had become a symbol, not of strength, but of something the court didn't understand: choice. She had chosen him, and now that choice stood in defiance of tradition. A broadcast alert flashed across the chamber. The masked enemy leader had sent a final message. "We descend not as conquerors, but as heirs. Step aside, and your planet will remain untouched. Resist, and we burn every city until the soil forgets your name." The Empress stepped forward, eyes locked on the screen. "This world remembers what was," she said, voice steady. "But it chooses what will be. I am the future. You are the shadow, and this is where your legacy ends." With a single nod, she ordered full countermeasures. Starfighters launched into orbit like arrows loosed from a galactic bow. Automated drones surged from underground hangars, moving in elegant patterns around the palace skies. But the enemy didn't flinch. Their ships pressed forward, black as night and twice as merciless. The first blast struck a civilian district. On the outer edge, fire lit the sky, and screams echoed through the transmission feed. Varela didn't hesitate. "Divert half of our fleet to shield evacuation corridors," she said. "Protect the people first. We hold the crown not for power, but for responsibility." Elias watched her, the weight of her choices visible in every breath. He wanted to help, to act, but he wasn't a warrior. He turned to one of the aides and asked, "Where can I make a difference?" The aide hesitated, then gestured toward the communication wing. "You can help spread orders. Patch updates. Keep the panic down." He ran through the corridors, arriving at the chamber where dozens of operatives shouted into open lines. He grabbed a headset and repeated vital updates. "Sector 7, hold until evac completes. Redirect fire teams to the eastern corridor. Do not engage unless fired upon first. Outside, The battle raged like a storm made of steel and light. Virela led every movement with precision. Her commands were flawless, her presence unshaken. But inside, she knew the real battle was not against ships or fire. It was against time. The enemy wasn't just here to fight. They were here to split her people apart. A report came in. One of the noble houses had withdrawn its fleet from the defense grid. A betrayal. The council chamber erupted in outrage. They think your connection to a human has weakened your judgment, a general warned. They want the throne returned to blood. Virela's jaw tightened. Then let them see what that blood is worth when it hides behind shields while we stand exposed. She activated the Imperial beacon and broadcast her next order across the entire empire. This is your Empress. Today, I do not ask for loyalty. I ask for courage. If my blood is not enough to defend you, then let my actions speak louder. The tide of the battle began to shift. Reinforcements surged in from outer moons. Minor houses, inspired by her stand, returned to the line. Ships that had drifted began to circle back, drawn by something greater than fear belief. In the communications wing, Elias noticed something strange. A repeating signal buried in the enemy's data stream. A pattern that wasn't weapon control or coordinates. It was a message hidden deep inside the code. He traced it quickly, and his eyes widened. He ran back to the war chamber breathless. Virela, they've been sending a sublayer signal. It's not just a battle order. It's a virus targeting your crown interface. If they gain control, they can shut you down completely. She turned sharply. Then we fight not just in the sky, but inside the crown itself. She removed the artifact and handed it to him. You fixed it once. Now protect it. Seal it from whatever they've sent. No matter what happens out there, keep it alive. And with fire in her eyes, she turned back to the stars, ready to command her people not just as Empress, but as a shield against everything that wanted to erase them. Elias took the crown in both hands and felt the pulse of its energy flickering like a wounded heartbeat. The enemy signal was latching onto the neural threads, trying to corrupt the crown's internal matrix. He rushed toward the sealed engineering chamber where the crown had first accepted his hands and his presence. Inside, the lights dimmed and the hum of the ancient technology grew louder. He placed the crown on the pedestal and called up the interface. Symbols rose around him in holographic rings, some familiar, others ancient and unreadable. But the signal was there, pulsing like poison beneath the flow of data. He worked fast, isolating the code and redirecting power lines to contain the infection. Sweat poured down his face as the interface fought back, reacting violently to the hidden attack. It wasn't just a virus. It was a rewrite command, designed to override the authority of the wearer and transfer control to an external source. Virela's voice came through the emergency link. They're forcing ground engagement. I'll lead the defense from the gates. I trust you, Elias. Do what only you can do. Her voice didn't tremble, but there was something in it that made his hands move faster. Each corrupted thread had to be purged manually. Elias ran diagnostics, filtered command chains, and severed lines before they could collapse. He knew that if one strand failed, the crown would reject her completely. And if that happened, the empire would lose its heart. Outside, the capital shook under the tremble of falling ships. Virela stood on the palace steps, blade drawn, leading the front line herself. Her armor was scorched, her voice hoarse, but her stance never wavered. Even the enemy forces slowed when they saw her fire-lit silhouette waiting for them. The enemy commander landed in the center of the ruined plaza. His mask gleamed in the smoke. He raised his arm and pointed at her without a word. Behind him, rows of soldiers advanced with precision, moving like machines bred for conquest. But she didn't fall back. You want the throne? She shouted. Then take it with your hands, not your virus. Face me, coward. Prove your blood is worth remembering. Her words echoed across the battlefield, halting the first wave of attack. The commander removed his mask, revealing a face twisted by ambition and scarred by exile. "We are not here for duels," he spat. "We are here to erase your name from every stone your ancestors ever touched. That crown belongs to us, by blood." She stepped forward and raised her blade. "Then you'll have to spill every drop of mine to earn it." Back in the chamber, Elias reached the final lockout node. The corrupted signal had almost broken through. With one last command, he fused the node with a firewall crafted from Earth's encryption language. The system paused, flickered, then roared back to life as the virus burned out. He grabbed the crown and sprinted from the chamber. The ground shook beneath his feet as explosions lit up the inner walls. Debris fell from the ceiling. He reached the outer gate where Varela stood bleeding but unbowed. Her army was falling back. The enemy commander approached her with fire in his hand. Elias shouted her name. She turned just as he threw the crown through the smoke. She caught it midair and placed it back upon her head. In that instant, the command field flared back into existence. A blast of power radiated from her like a storm, knocking the enemy backward in waves. The sky above shimmered with new light as allied ships broke through, drawn by the emergency beacon now restored through the crown. The tide turned within moments. Enemy forces broke formation, retreating under the weight of resistance they had not expected. The masked commander tried to flee, but Varela was faster. She cut through the rubble, blade flashing once, and silence followed. Her people rallied, and the banners that had fallen were raised again by hands that had once doubted her rule. Elias reached her side, breathless and bruised. She turned to him slowly, her face tired but radiant. "You saved more than my crown," she said. "You saved my name, my people. You saved me." And for the first time, she didn't wait for anyone to speak first. She leaned forward and kissed him, right there in front of the world that once questioned him. The battle ended with smoke rising above the capital and silence falling across the palace grounds. The once proud city was scarred, its towers blackened and streets cracked, but it still stood. The enemy had retreated beyond the stars, their command ship disabled, and their legacy shattered by the very bloodline they tried to erase. Varela stood at the edge of the Great Wall, watching as her people began to rebuild. Her robes were torn, her armor dented, but her crown remained intact. The very symbol they had tried to corrupt now shone brighter, as if forged anew through the fire of truth. Elias stood beside her, his clothes still stained with ash and sweat. The people around them bowed as they passed, no longer in forced obedience, but in quiet respect. Whispers of his name had already started to spread through the outer districts. Some called him the crown's guardian. Others simply called him the human. She turned to him, her voice low but steady. "They'll ask questions," she said, "about what happens next. About who will stand beside me during the coronation. Some will resist. Some will leave the council. Some may even try to strike again." Elias didn't blink. "Let them come," he said. "I won't step back now. You gave me a place in your world. I won't let it be taken by anyone who fears love more than tradition." She smiled at him, soft but proud, the kind of smile that came from surviving what should have destroyed. The day of the formal coronation came with golden skies and wind that carried the scent of rebirth. The palace was cleaned, the banners repaired, and the great hall filled with every noble who remained loyal. The empress walked down the aisle between them, not carried, not guarded, simply followed by one human who walked at her pace. As she reached the altar, she turned to face her people. "The crown has returned to its light," she said. "But I am not its master, I am only its keeper. And today, I make my first decree not from power, but from choice." She looked toward Elias and extended her hand. The hall tensed. Some gasped. Others whispered. But none spoke loud enough to interrupt her voice. "This human once held my crown when no one else could. He guarded it when others fled. And he stood beside me when the stars tried to silence my name. Elias stepped forward slowly. Every step echoed through the marble floor, every eye fixed on him, yet he only saw her. When he reached her, he didn't kneel. He simply took her hand and held it as if it belonged there. She turned to the nobles once more. "I name him my consort," she declared. "Not by blood, not by law, but by heart. Let the galaxy know that love does not weaken a throne. It strengthens it. And today, we begin not a new reign, but a new story." The crown lit up with soft pulses as if responding to her truth. The nobles who remained bowed without hesitation. The ones who had doubted began to lower their heads too, one by one, until even the most stubborn among them followed suit. None dared question a ruler who had already passed every trial the stars had thrown. That evening, the city celebrated not only the survival of their empire, but the beginning of something unrecorded in their long history. Lights filled the sky. Music echoed from the high towers to the deepest streets. And in the center of it all, two figures stood hand in hand without need for titles or symbols. They visited the royal garden again, where once she had first asked him if he loved her. The same orbs floated softly in the air, the same silence danced between their breaths. But now there was no hesitation, no fear, only truth waiting to be spoken. She looked at him and whispered, "Do you love me, human?" This time, he didn't freeze or falter. He pulled her closer and kissed her forehead gently before answering, "With everything I am, and everything I was never supposed to be." And so, the crown that once bound rulers to duty now glowed in tune with a heart that had chosen love over legacy. The galaxy watched in silence as the empire grew not through conquest, but through courage and compassion. And in the oldest star records, a new name was written beside the Empress's, his, the human who was chosen, not born.